Friendship is often described as a bond stronger than blood, a sanctuary where trust and loyalty thrive. But what happens when the seeds of jealousy creep in, twisting that bond into something unrecognizable? When admiration turns into envy, and envy into betrayal, the devastation can be unimaginable. Such was the case between Brianna and Isabel, two girls who once shared everything, until jealousy turned their friendship into a breeding ground for darkness. Brianna and Isabel couldn't have been more different, yet they were inseparable. Brianna, bold and brimming with confidence, basked in the spotlight of high school popularity. Isabel, with her quiet strength and unshakable morals, earned respect without even trying. To the outside world, they seemed like the perfect balance, fire and water, light and shadow. But beneath the surface of their friendship lurked a dangerous truth: Brianna's growing resentment of Isabel's virtue and the admiration it garnered. What began as a faint pang of jealousy grew into an obsession. Brianna had always craved attention. It was her fuel, her validation, the measure of her worth. Her life revolved around her ability to command a room, to make heads turn, and to leave people wanting more. Yet, for all her allure and popularity, she carried an emptiness within her, a void she filled with fleeting romances, sleeping around with men, and superficial praise. Beneath her confident exterior was a girl burdened by the choices she had made, haunted by the whispers that followed her wherever she went. She was well aware of the reputation she had earned, a reputation she could not escape. In sharp contrast, Isabel embodied everything Brianna was not. Sweet-natured and graceful, Isabel's quiet presence commanded respect. Her decision to remain pure wasn't something she flaunted, it was simply who she was. Yet, it was this very purity that drew admiration and set her apart. People spoke of Isabel as a beacon of integrity, a rarity in their high school world of impulsive decisions and fleeting standards. She was the girl everyone trusted, the one parents pointed to as an example, and the one teachers praised for her grounded maturity. Brianna envied this about Isabel, though she couldn't admit it at first. Isabel's unshakable sense of self felt like a spotlight illuminating Brianna's own insecurities. Over time, envy turned to resentment, and resentment began to rot her soul. Brianna became consumed with the idea that Isabel's virtue wasn't just a personal choice, but an unspoken rebuke of her own lifestyle. Isabel earned respect and reverence from the high school boys who would approach Brianna for sex, and this felt like a stark reminder of Brianna's tarnished image, a confirmation that she was falling short in ways she could never fix. In her darkest moments, Brianna began to convince herself that Isabel's purity was a facade, a tool she used to gain favor and outshine others. She felt which right-thinking teenager will choose to stay a virgin till marriage in the modern world. This distorted view gave rise to a terrifying idea. If Isabel's purity could be shattered, she would no longer have the power to overshadow Brianna. In her mind, this wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming her identity, about not being seen as the loose girl that she is, about finally feeling worthy in a world that had judged her so harshly. Driven by these poisonous thoughts, Brianna hatched a plan so vile that even she felt a flicker of hesitation. She dismissed it as weakness, drowning her doubts in the intoxicating lure of power and control. She decided that Isabel's virtue needed to be destroyed in the most brutal way possible, through rape and death. Brianna sought out boys from school, ones who thrived on chaos, who would find excitement in such a horrifying proposition. She framed the plan as a way to teach Isabel a lesson, manipulating them with her charm and promises of secrecy. The details of the plan were carefully laid out, but the intent was monstrous. Brianna had no illusions about the gravity of what she was planning. Deep down, she knew she was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But jealousy had warped her so completely that morality no longer held any sway. She rationalized her actions by convincing herself that Isabel deserved it, that her so-called perfection had been a lie all along, a carefully curated mask that made everyone else look small in comparison. The more Brianna dwelled on this narrative, the more she believed it. She told herself that by tearing Isabel down, she was exposing the truth, leveling the playing field, and reclaiming the respect she had always craved. Her jealousy fueled her anger, and her anger gave birth to a twisted sense of pride. This wasn't just revenge, Brianna thought it was justice. Yet, as the day of the plan approached, Brianna's inner turmoil began to reveal itself in subtle ways. Her once confident demeanor now carried an edge of desperation. Her laughs were louder, her smiles more forced. She was unraveling, but her pride wouldn't let her admit it. She had come too far, and the path back to reason seemed as impossible as the one she had chosen. And the D-Day came. On their way back home from school, she told Isabel that there was going to be a party later that day at the abandoned parking lot not far from their school. Isabel, as trusting of their friendship as ever, believed Brianna. Even though she didn't hear any of the kids at school discussing a party, she totally believed her friend. The night hung heavy with an unsettling stillness, the kind that precedes something unspeakable. Brianna stood near the edge of the abandoned lot, the rendezvous point she had carefully chosen for its isolation. There was no noise save for the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze and the occasional hum of distant cars. It was the perfect place for her plan, a plan that had consumed her every thought for weeks. She clutched her phone tightly, checking the time and sending one last text to Isabel. "Everyone's already here. Don't be late." Isabel, unsuspecting and trusting as always, had believed every word. The thought of mingling and enjoying a carefree evening filled her with excitement. Little did she know, her so-called friend had led her into a trap. Brianna had orchestrated everything with meticulous precision. The boys she had enlisted were already lurking in the shadows, their faces obscured by hoodies, their whispers sharp with anticipation. They were ready to carry out the task they'd been promised, an act so vile it bordered on the unthinkable. Brianna had convinced them it was just a cruel prank, a way to knock Isabel off her pedestal. As Isabel approached the lot, her steps hesitant but eager, Brianna's heart raced. She watched her friend from afar, a strange mix of satisfaction and unease bubbling within her. Isabel's figure emerged under the pale glow of the streetlight, her expression shifting from confusion to concern as she realized there was no party in sight. She called out for Brianna, her voice soft but tinged with worrying. Brianna stepped out from the shadows, her face carefully arranged into a welcoming smile, and told her that she was early while everyone else was late. Isabel's relief was palpable, and she walked closer, unaware of the danger that loomed behind her. The boys began to close in, their footsteps silent but deliberate. Isabel turned her head at the faint sound of movement, her instincts prickling with unease. "Brianna, what's going on?" she asked, her voice now laced with suspicion. Brianna hesitated, a flicker of guilt crossing her face, but she quickly buried it. She told herself this was necessary, that Isabel deserved this for being the perfect girl everyone adored. Before Isabel could say another word, she was dragged onto the floor and held down by a boy while the others started to enclad her forcefully, despite her trying to resist them. And behind them was her so-called friend filming everything with her phone. Brianna's plan was to record the process of Isabel being defiled without revealing the identities of the boys, and then posting it online for everyone to see. Afterwards, she would stab Isabel to death on that spot. Even the boys she had hired were not aware of the fact that she wanted to stab Isabel to death after they had raped her. She didn't tell them this part, but she knew they wouldn't say anything, as she would blackmail them with their mutual secret if they as much as tried to talk. Isabel screamed and pleaded, but sadly no one came to her rescue as the two boys took their turn in defiling her. Her innocence was gone in the most horrible way. And to top it off, her so-called best friend had it all recorded. When the boys finished their evil acts, they began to dress up like nothing happened. But to their shock, Brianna brought out a sharp knife and lunged at Isabel, who was still crying on the floor. She plunged the knife into Isabel's heart several times. The boys were shocked. This wasn't part of the plan, but before they could say another word, a sound pierced the night, a sharp burst of sirens, their wailing growing louder with each passing second. Red and blue lights bathed the lot, illuminating the scene like a spotlight on a twisted stage. The boys froze, their bravado melting into panic. Brianna turned toward the approaching patrol car, her confusion giving way to fear as she realized that she had been caught in the act of stabbing her friend to death. Brianna's heart sank as the officers exited their vehicle, their movements swift and deliberate. She had spent so long imagining this night, convincing herself she would feel powerful and in control. Instead, she felt exposed, vulnerable, and terrified. The plan she had clung to like a lifeline had disintegrated before her eyes. She never ever thought that her plan would be ruined by a police patrol car. In fact, she had picked that spot because it was an abandoned parking lot. She had no idea that it was part of the route that the town's police patrol could pass. The officers apprehended the boys first, their protests and excuses falling on deaf ears. Then, they turned to Brianna. The cold metal of handcuffs around her wrists sent a jolt of reality through her, and the weight of her choices came crashing down. She wasn't in control. She wasn't the mastermind. She was just a frightened, broken girl who had allowed jealousy to destroy her life. Isabel's lifeless body was later carried into an ambulance that the police called. According to the police, while giving their report on the terrible incident, they were on their way to respond to a complaint about two neighbors fighting when they saw the horrific scene happening in the parking lot. In the sterile, dimly lit holding cell, Brianna sat alone, her hands trembling as they clasped tightly together. The hum of fluorescent lights above her was deafening in the silence that enveloped her. She could still feel the sting of the handcuffs on her wrists, though they had been removed hours ago, replaced by a cold, suffocating weight around her chest. Her mind was a jumbled mess of confusion, panic, and regret. As the minutes dragged on, the walls seemed to close in, and she had no choice but to face what she had done. The initial shock of the arrest had given way to a cold, harsh reality. She was no longer Brianna, the popular girl, the confident teenager who had commanded attention and admiration. Now, she was a criminal, her future shattered in an instant. As the trial loomed ahead, Brianna found herself unable to escape the truth. The realization came crashing down on her that her life, as she knew it, was over. The day of the trial was one mixed with different emotions. Brianna's confession had stunned everyone in the courtroom. Some even cried. They couldn't believe that such horror could live in the mind of a teenager. After hearing from both lawyers, the judge sentenced the boys to 13 years in prison for rape and Brianna to a life sentence of hard labor without parole. After the sentencing of the offenders, Isabel was laid to rest amidst tears and weeping from friends, family, and fellow students. Her story is such a sad one, and one that would forever be remembered, a young lady that was killed because of her innocence and modesty. However, Isabel's parents decided that their baby girl will not be remembered as a victim but rather as a symbol of purity and strength of character. Therefore, they started a woman-empowering foundation in her name. Isabel will forever remain in the heart of her family, friends, and the community at large. Rest in peace, Isabel. As for Brianna, her fate to a lifetime of sadness and hard labor was sealed. What lessons do you think society can learn from this case? Share your thoughts below. If you found this story compelling, please consider sharing it to spread awareness. Like this video, subscribe to uncover more true crime stories where deception and truth collide. Click here to watch another chilling case in our series.